The idea that you did something 10 years ago, which you would no longer agree with, is one thing. But the second thing, to come along to the conclusion that you now have no value to add to the world would be massively unfair, right? Everybody changes, and that's fine. People are messy, and life is messy, and nothing is completely clean. And this idea that you're going to find somebody and 10 or 11 years ago they did something which might even be slightly distasteful, not even illegal, and you're going to crucify him forever, I just don't believe that's genuine virtue. I think it's just an attack. But that's part of the life journey, and life's messy. And I'm not going to sit here and apologize to any conservative who wants to sit me down and try and give me some moral high ground garbage. I'm not going to listen to it. I had a very rough upbringing, a very tough life, and it could have been so much worse in so many ways. I've done nothing illegal. I've never hurt anybody. Everybody who was involved in my life back then are massive supporters of me. And I think it's very hypocritical for someone to sit, look at a situation they were not involved in and don't understand, look at old clips taken out of context, and then tell me and a whole bunch of people who were in my life who were all perfectly happy that something bad happened and something wrong happened. I don't think that's genuine. The reason I have such huge affinity with the youth of the world today, especially the masculine youth, is one, because a lot of them are disenfranchised, which is one conversation. But two, also the reason my reach is so global, the reason I have so many fans in Slovenia and Southside Chicago, and I've had kids from Ulaanbaatar come up to me, Mongolia, all around the world, is because I speak to the disenfranchised, and part of that is always going to be, or is going to involve, financially disenfranchised. And I think the reason I'm seen as a hero and the reason I have the fan base I have is because, to a degree, I've always been a flawed person, and I'm not a perfect human, and I don't want to be. And I think that actually adds a lot of credibility to my character as a whole, that I've become the kind of person who believes he can add value to the world. The biggest thing for me personally, though, truthfully, and I want the whole world to understand this, I've been forensically analyzed by multiple different federal agencies from different countries for the last 17 months, analyzing every aspect of my entire life across the last 10 to 15 years. And what did they find? An old YouTube clip? That's the worst they could find. No sexual perversion, no drugs, no genuine criminal acts. They found something semi-immoral in a YouTube clip. And I would actually challenge anybody who wants to throw stones at me to go through the same level of scrutiny I have been under. And let's see what they find in your life. Because I guarantee anyone who's watching this right now, you sit there, you have a secret in your closet, you have a skeleton that you don't want anyone to know about, and they would have found it. So what's the worst thing that they found about me, considering I've been the most attacked man in the world for 17 months? An out-of-date YouTube clip? An out-of-context YouTube clip? Is that the worst? But yeah, it was certainly uncomfortable, and it shows how degenerate the world is becoming. And pornography as a whole is simply just, I think it's an effect. I think it's a tool which is used to ensure that the male populace stays as docile as possible. I don't think that any of the things that are happening to the male population are accidental. I think that keeping us as docile as possible is very interesting for the people who are in charge of the world, because we're the warrior class. At the end of the day, it's going to boil down to the men who are going to stand up and actually do something about anything at some point in time. So I think they like the idea of us being docile. And I mean, how much more docile can you get than a man sitting there looking at a screen, not even want to reproduce for real because he's just staring at a screen? And I think that's just the next stage in the slave mine. I remember in my lifetime, there were music videos that got censored or banned or can only be played after 10 or 11 at night. And if you watch them now, you'd be like, what? For what? What is that, a bikini? Like, it's nothing. It's amazing how quickly it has degenerated. And this is what the powers that be want. They want to make sure that the male populace is as docile as possible. And they do that with a large array of weapons. And they do that with a web of tools. And I believe that I'm the counter to that, which is the reason I ended up attacked in the first place. But unfortunately, when you buy into the slave mind programming, you not become the kind of man who can easily attract a woman, because you're not attractive to females as a whole. So how do you satisfy yourself? You end up sitting there staring at a screen, and they convince you that's a good life to live as a man, and that's perfectly fine and perfectly normal. And you don't even get to genetically reproduce. I do also, though, and I want to make this clear, I do believe in absolute and utter self-accountability as a man. I think as a man, everything that happens to you is your fault. Me going to jail was my fault. Me being attacked online was my fault. If all these bad things that happened to me, I will take responsibility for, even if I believe they were unfair or unjust. And I think that any man who's going to sit there and say, I'm struggling, he also needs to wake up and understand that if you're going to truly struggle to not click on a website, then you're going to deserve the terrible life you're going to live. And the devil or the matrix, or whatever you want to call them, are going to fill your life with temptations. They're going to fill your life with easy way outs that they're going to want you to take, because the good road is usually the hardest road. And if you're going to continue to fall for them, then you're going to have to suffer the consequences of that. So it's double-edged. It's certainly difficult that pornography is everywhere and men are struggling with it. But to me, what's even more upsetting is that these men don't have enough fortitude and enough mental strength to wake up and say, I'm better than that. I think that it's actually all very interconnected. People come at me with the porn problem, and I get the same thing. Guys say to me all the time, hey, what are you gonna do? What should I do? I struggle with pornography. And I say, that's because you have nothing else in your life in order. If you were in good physical condition, and you had the money you were supposed to have, and you had the mentality you were supposed to have, you wouldn't need it. So the reason you're so addicted to porn is because everything else in your life is a failure. And yeah, it's certainly a complicated issue. It's a difficult one. And this is why they fear male agency so much, because when men truly wake up and decide to be the best versions of themselves, they're hard to control because all these control mechanisms fall by the wayside. They don't want the porn anymore. They don't want the antidepressants anymore. They don't want the garbage anymore. And now you have a whole bunch of men who actually want truth and honor and respect, and they want to live for something. And then what are they going to live for? They're going to want to be brave. They're going to want to do the right thing, regardless of how dangerous it may be for their own personal circumstance. And that sounds like a difficult population to enslave. And that's what's scary. If you want to sit and tell a disadvantaged youth growing up in the south side of Chicago how he's supposed to live his life from your perfectly manicured garden and your white picket fence, you're not going to get through to that person. They don't care. I've got the big cars and pretty women, and I live the lifestyle. If you want to really capture the youth of today, you need to get some kind of affinity with them. They need to at least want to be you to a degree. You need to at least be their hero to a degree. This is where liberalism wins. I don't think a lot of conservatives understand that liberalism's sexy. You do drugs, you run around, you burn stuff. It's cool, you get a party. Because what do conservatives do? Stay home, stay home, stay home. It's boring, right? At least what they don't understand is that conservatives will sit there and go, he's a terrible role model because he has all these pretty girls in this fast car and he's a materialistic. That's the reason I can actually help the world. That's the reason young boys will listen to me. You said it yourself, 14, 15-year-old boys, they'll look at my life and go, okay, I want to listen to this guy. They don't want to listen to me if I sit behind a desk and read Republican Bill 308. I don't read that crap. I don't know. And they don't care. To be a hero, you have to be attacked and you have to be an imperfect person. And that's the reality of the world. And culture is super important. And you're right in regards to conservatives giving up. I'm trying to think of conservative culture now. I mean, I like to think that we're making degeneracy unpopular. I like to think that there are some good voices out there that is making God cool again. I actually like to believe the pendulum is swinging. I do believe it. And I see it online. And it's a combination of so many small things coming together almost in perfect timing. But it is cultural. You need a cultural shift that moves away from this insanity. And you're right. If you just want to sit there and just preach, nobody's going to be interested in it. And I also think that especially in the masculine realm, I can't talk for being a woman, but I can talk for being a man. In the masculine realm, we certainly like to see people lead by absolute and utter example. Because traditionally, we would be following our commander or the man we respected into war. So we'd like to know he can at least fight. You like to see he's at least brave. You like to see him lead by example. And I think especially if conservatives want to win the culture war, then they need to lead by example. If you're gonna be a conservative preacher and you want to tell men about how they should live their lives, you should be as strong as possible. You should look in shape. You should be big. You should show you're motivated, you're disciplined. You should absolutely, of course, we all have vices, but you should be very disciplined with your outlook. You should make it very clear to the outside world that what you've done wrong, what you haven't done wrong, you should take accountability. I think you need to lead by example. I don't think you can preach to men. I don't think you can preach to young boys. I think that's the reason why they don't do so well in school in general. I don't think that's the reason why they're disenfranchised. I think you need to just lead by example and let them follow. And I feel like I'm kind of doing that by just standing up and saying, no, this is who I am and I'm unapologetic for it. And this is what I've done. And this is what I intend on doing. And I'm going to try and save the world.